work.
He gave you enormous responsibility at a very young age also, strikes me. I mean, he put
Well,
you,
I think the last time we left off about the time I went on and commanded a battalion, right?
we haven't done anything about that yet.
But the Depew story is a story in asking for a job with him
Right.
and being denied a job,
Being told you weren't qualified.
which I'm not qualified again because I don't have advanced degree. I'm never qualified for these jobs that
Right.
I'm given. And but finally I get the job, and then within a month I'm off on a sort of a detached project for him. And then I get one of these mentoring deals because I'm working with the Secretary of the Army for 8 hours a week. Now, 8 hours, spending a whole day, or 4 hours, or 2 hours, 3 days a week, or whatever, spending 8 hours a week with the Secretary of the Army for a period of 3 months is an uncommon event for a lieutenant colonel, unless you're his exec. And even then, it may not be substantive. But now I'm in the substantive
Right. You're
business
working.
with the Secretary of the Army. His name is Stan Resor, for whom I have enormous respect and affection. And the interaction between Depew and Resor and me made me a different person in terms of understanding the secondary and tertiary effects of things and the interrelationship of things in the Army or in national security affairs. So doing that for 6 months, or about 4 months for Resor, and then doing that for another 1.5 years for Depew before I get promoted to colonel, makes me a different guy. I mean, it really makes me a different guy as far as the Army is concerned.
I could use a
But
head
that's
break.
later. Sure.
Are you interested in lunch?
No.
No. Good. I'm not
Little
either.
project. Oh, the exec. So he gives me the famous mission is clean them up. So we get running convoys all in the middle of the night. We get 16 out of the 18 up. So he looks good the next morning on the deal. So a couple of weeks pass. We're down about the second or third month of my tenure as the XO, and I said I want to take a couple of day holiday and 2 days off. He said, where are you going? So I'm going over to the 25th Division and get myself a battalion. And now my brother was the Davardi commander of the 25th Division, but he could see daylight that he was getting ready to leave. I mean, his tour was about up. So I went over to the 25th Division at Cu Chi and interviewed with the Chief of Staff of the division and the division division commander, and they agreed that they would hire me as a battalion commander. Now I had begun to fulfill the responsibilities now as outlined by the MACV commander, that I was at least back with troops and back in the artillery and was an XO or whatever. And so I was beginning to, once in theater, you know, you could sort of ameliorate the 4 things that they'd levied on Milpercent. So I came back and said to Colonel Norris that I had been accepted by the division commander. And I told him I'd extend, you know, and stay over there wherever time it took to take the battalion, which would be after my brother left, because he obviously couldn't have nepotism in the show like that. So I don't know, about a week or 10 days or 2 weeks later, Norris said to me one day, well, I'm going to Long Bend. I'm going to take a day of R&R. I'm going to Long Bend. So he went down to Long Bend, and he came back the next day, and he said, you're going to take command of the 35th Artillery, which was the local battalion in Swan Lake. Second of the 35th was a 155 self-propelled, and I had been of course I'd come up in the airborne, I was a 105 guy, so, and the 25th Division had 105, so I was very conversant with the 105s. So I said, well, the commander of the 2nd and 35th doesn't know he's leaving because he's on R&R in Hawaii. He said, well, when he comes back, you're going to be the commander, and he's going to go to Long Bend.
Is he being fired? Was that what?
No, he hadn't been fired, just Norris apparently was, it was in the hands worth 14 in the bush, you know, in terms of, he knew me now, and so he knew I was going to leave and go get a battalion, and therefore he would rather me to be a battalion commander than take somebody he never saw before.
Okay.
And so he'd gone to Long Bend and made arrangements with the 2 Field Force artillery commander to move out Al Gendron. Al Gendron was the battalion commander. And so he did.
So Al had done his 6 months or whatever,
Yeah.
or whatever you're allowed to do.
Yeah. And so I took over the battalion, and this was about a month before TET. And so I was the battalion commander, and it was a very unusual battalion. I only massed the battalion. Artilleryman looks at how many times do you mass a battalion, and I massed it twice
They were so
in
far
7
scattered.
months. Because the 3 batteries were farmed out. One was farmed out to the Australians, one was farmed out to the 9th Division, and the 3rd one was farmed out to Long Bend to protect the northern approaches to Long Bend. And now they maneuvered all that time, but in the main, one was located south down towards the 9th Division south of Saigon, Mito, Kanto, area down in there. And one was north of Saigon, operated with 101st, 25th sometimes. And one was essentially assigned to the Australians. So my job was, one, I was the battalion commander located in Swan Lock, and so I had the domain around supporting the Arvin Division that was there, and the also located there was a 175 battery, and I had that battery and me, one of my batteries, in and out. And so the long-range fires were cooking up north. I supported the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. So I got a variety of opportunities to see a variety of commanders who operated in and out of the area east of Saigon, a little bit north of Saigon, and south of Saigon. Battery commanders were essentially autonomous, and I had to go out and see to them and see that we had ammunition and all that kind of stuff. But in the main, I had to redispose those batteries to support the guys that they were supporting, and so I had to keep up with the Australians, what they were doing, and their battle plan. I had to keep up with the 101st, what they were doing. That's where I met Dave Grange for the first time. He was a battalion commander in the 101st. General Fred Davison was down in the Delta. 9th Division, Fulton, Emerson, and those guys down the Delta. So I got an opportunity to observe a lot of people that worked in the battle plan.
When the Australians have a brigade, infantry
Yeah.
brigade, did they have their own direct support battalion?
Yes, they did.
So your comp battery would be reinforcing it.
Yeah,
Would
I was
they,
reinforcing everybody.
and would the reinforced outfit assume responsibility for rations and ammunition and
No, I didn't.
Intelligence, really? My God. You must have trucks going everywhere.
Had ammo going everywhere, trucks going everywhere,
You had to
people
secure-
going everywhere, maintenance going everywhere.
Secure all those convoys. Did you have a helicopter?
No,
You
I
had to
got it
borrow one.
assigned to me from 2 Field Force Artillery every day. Came that close to getting killed in it one day when the rotor fell off, or the tail rotor fell off after I got out of it. It took off to go back home and the tail rotor fell off and it killed the warrant officer driving that airplane. The next day one came in just like it, OH-58 came in just like it. No, it's 086. So that bubble thing that has the upper boom in the back. So I told the guy, shut the engine down, and you and I are going to inspect this airplane. Warrant officer. So he said, what do you mean we're going to inspect it before? I pre-flighted before you guys said, get out, shut it down. So I said, now the last one that flew in the air killed a guy yesterday. So I said, we're going to inspect this one real close here. So I go around, I look down the boom, and I said, what are these cracks doing in here in the boom? Metal fatigue. So there aren't supposed to be any cracks. So I said, you didn't inspect this very well. Called up the 2 Field Force aviation officer. He said, you get down here now. Find out whether your guys know what the hell they're looking for here, because I'm not getting in this one and have the boom come off this while I'm in it. So, but I had a helicopter every day, flew all over the joint. Had 2 sergeant majors in that outfit. First sergeant major, I fired because we got attacked one day, and I looked around for the sergeant major who was normally helping me out on the perimeter. He wasn't around, and he was shacked up downtown in Swan Lake. And when the mortar attack began, the ground assault began, why he didn't show up for duty. So I cashiered him. I went after him, by the way, myself.
Found him in his shack.
Yeah. And second guy was a guy named Theriak. And Theriak was a bachelor like I was. He's just a wonderful guy, very big, burly guy. And Theriak and I became very great friends. Later, he's the guy that stays overseas all the time. So he stays with troops. And I tried to get him to become the sergeant major of the 2nd Division when my brother commanded the 2nd Division. He wouldn't take it. He was the Departy sergeant major, but he wouldn't take the division sergeant. He didn't want to do that. Too far away from the troops. He and I were great pals, great buds, so we kept that stuff going. We had a great group of battery commanders. Jay Pennywell was a black officer who later went on to be the PMS down at Prairie View A&M, and then stayed at Prairie View A&M and became the assistant to the president down there. He's still down there. He's doing a terrific job down there. A guy named Gunter was a battery commander, and he worked with people down in the Delta. And he was a terrific, little big guy, German guy, speaks fluent German, or is German. And he later worked for me in TRADOC as my German liaison officer. And third guy, I'm having a blowdown on his name right now, but worked for me later at Fort Sill when I was TRADOC commander. He was at Fort Sill, worked in the combat developments business out there. And they were all 3 excellent battery commanders. And their job obviously was to get along with the people they supported, and we did. And it's contrary to mud puddles what was the other item?
It's your ass if you kill your own man.
Kill your own man. Their view was it's your ass if you don't do what the supported artillery guy wants you to do in support of his troops. You better be ready to shoot a lot of bullets. Gunner had a case of down in the Delta where they fired some outrageous number of rounds, like 3,000 rounds in a 24-hour day period, 155 house. Just blew the hydraulics out of them and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just a terrific action down there. She kept the guns going. And finally, he was firing so much, he called one out, let it cool down, and cycle it back in. Excellent group of battery commanders.
How about your headquarters battery commander? He
Can't even tell you what his name was.
Yeah, I was thinking, 'cause you had a your
Dispersed
headquarters-
operation.
Yeah, and you had a local defense responsibility apparently,
Yeah.
without any artillery necessarily to back it up.
Didn't have any short-range artillery. I had 175s. They're not very good for
No.
low order stuff. I put in made all the guys go into a Killer Junior mode, which I had known some 105 units that got in that, but 155s didn't really get into that. But the Killer Junior game, so I gave every one of my section chiefs a card that had the lowest fuse setting on it, the lowest quadrant you could set on it, and every time you pulled in position, you had to fire that thing in the nearest tree line around you to make sure anybody was looking at your position knew that you'd blow them away.
With
Yeah.
several rounds around the
Yeah.
perimeter?
Yeah, I mean, really close-in stuff. I mean, you get a base plate coming in off of a 155, which it'll come back on you. You have to watch what you're doing about that. But I'd fire 155 at ranges of maybe 300 meters with a
But not
air
high
burst.
angle, you did
No,
direct.
straight on.
Yeah.
But with the fuse cut to nothing. So you get an air burst
At 300
at
meters.
300 meters outside position. Well, there's enough brisance in the round to send the base plate back into your position area. So you had to know what you're doing about that. But that gave great confidence to the troopers in that thing. So I felt good about being a battery commander, or battalion commander over there, and being a 155 guy then gave me a new weapon. Now I've been a 105 guy, and then I was a
ESP.
155 guy, and
Honest
Hawk
John.
guy, and Honest John guy. So I felt better as more competent as an artillery officer by virtue of being given a different weapon to learn something about, because I didn't really know much about a 155 and been around those, especially an SB guy.
Or M109s?
Yeah. I recall the Inspector General, I had one of the first IGs ever to come into Vietnam.
Oh, that's all you
It
need.
was after Tet, they decided they'd bring an IG team in. So IG team came in and said, we're going to have to flunk your battalion on the IG. I said, for what? They said, well, you have not maintained your nuclear capability. All 155 units supposed to be nuclear capable. I said, you're right, I haven't. And I said, furthermore, I have no intention of doing that. He said, well, you'll need to send some of your people to school
Jesus.
in Korea. And I said, write that up big. Really write that up, and then let's go up and talk to the group commander. And the next thing I knew, the guy IG comes back in and says, oh, by the way, we're going to have to we're going to have to deadline some of your 5 tons. I said, you are? I said, what's wrong with them? He said, well, you got welded steering arm brackets on the hydraulic steering things. I said, is that right? He said, yeah, the steering arm brackets been cracked and they've been re-welded, and they got 10 tons worth of ammunition. 5-ton trucks, but they're grossly overloaded. And I said, you go ahead and write that up. I'll take that to you. He said, well, we're going to deadline it. I said, you go ahead and deadline it. Until I got it, get going, drive it, damn vehicles, don't give me any shit here, go out and do your work. So it was great. sport. Now, I miss being a DS artillery guy, because I thought I knew something about DS artillery, direct support artillery, having been a guy who had been in a division for 5 years, and I missed that. And I felt badly about that. But the opportunity came to, I had a certain amount of loyalty to Colonel Norris, and he wanted me to do that, and my first loyalty was him because I was part of his organization, so I couldn't walk away from that. He's still living. He lives here in Washington, somewhere, Virginia. He and Dino both. So two guys I hadn't done, and my commanders in Vietnam are
Both here.
both here in town.
Tell me more about that ground attack on your position, your headquarters position. Mortar attack, was there?
Well, we had sporadic mortar attacks come in. I had my ear was calculated to hear mortars.
That's where the calibration was.
You hear all kinds of background noises, 175 rounds leading on it, but there's a distinctive pop of a mortar when it leaves the tube. And I knew that they were firing anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 meters out, and that would give you 82 millimeter mortars, and I knew that would give you enough time to leave my hooch if I didn't put on any shoes. So I always slept in my shorts so I could get to the bunker by the time the rounds landed. So they would hose us down on occasion, and then on one occasion, well, several occasions they had a ground. I was there on one ground attack. And I don't know, maybe a company of local BC that were trying to see whether or not we would be able to respond to them. So we had a good perimeter defense.
What all was inside your perimeter beside your headquarters battery?
Well, we had a headquarters battery in there, and we had a perimeter that included positions for either a 105 or 155 battery. The 175s were located in a different compound, and the headquarters of the 54th Artillery Group is in yet another compound. So there were several compounds in this provincial capital. And essentially it was the battalion headquarters.
Did you have
Service battery headquarters.
Did you have any artillery that could fire in support of you? Fire on
Only
your
on
perimeter?
occasion. Only on occasion. We did have, on occasion, we would have some dusters in there as well.
Yeah, that's, so you're dependent on your own small arms essentially to defend.
Yeah, machine gun, small arms.
How'd you organize that? Did you organize it, or did the headquarters battery commander organize it?
The exec organizer. He's in charge of the front areas. I was on the road all the time. I mean, so my unit was not there. And my view was I had the responsibility for two things. One, may seem a little crass here, but my duty was twofold. One was to frequently, as if I were a direct support artillery officer, visit the unit to which I had my batteries attached to find out, one, what their plans were, so that I would be able to support them, and two, where they get the requisite support from my group, my batteries. And my second responsibility was to the battery commander to enable him to get the necessary resources to do his job, whether it was ammo or parts or people or stroking him and telling me he's doing a good job or whatever. So I spent all my time on the road. So I gave the exec the mission of running the business associated with the headquarters compound, the supply and maintenance game from the headquarters standpoint. And my exec became a lieutenant general, so he must have done all right with Ed Soyster. And the S3, now the S3 had a function not of coordinating the batteries out there, but he had a function of coordinating the artillery support that was in the Swan Lock area.
Which is constantly changing. Did he
Well,
run
it came in,
MDC?
well, the 175 sort of stayed there, but the other batteries rotated through there. Was 105 or 155 that came through, and sometimes there'd be a battery there, sometimes not. But he would be responsible for the Swan Lock well, better said, the H&I fires, harassing interdiction fires and the like. So we had a very decentralized operation. The exec was essentially in charge of the headquarters compound, including its security and perimeter, along with the sergeant major. But it was really more he and the headquarters commandant ran that. The sergeant major and I were on the road all the time.
Didn't your battery commanders change while you were there? You were there for 8 months, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there for 8 months, but the principal commanders are the two identified, and I'll think of the third guy here shortly. Yeah, I had an influx of headquarters and service battery guys, and I don't even remember their names because they were remotely interested in what I was doing. But the principal guys were Gunther, Pinche, Pennywell, and the third guy just sounded a blow down. That's what I would remind you of that.
How about your lieutenants? Did you get to know them much, or were they the battery commander's problem?
Not much interaction with lieutenants.
Did you have any liaison officers permanently resident with reinforced units?
Yeah, I had, but I can't tell you what their names were. I had a liaison officer. What I do is assign the liaison officer with the battery command. Yeah,
Can you talk to General Maxwell?
sure, I always talk to him. I get around to one battery commander at a time, you know, because distances were what they were, but I try to get to one or two a day.
Yeah, that's important. There's another thing that's important. I'm astonished that you said that the reinforced units did not provide logistical support, but you had to do it, which meant your trucks must have been strung out, must have been going all the time, and must have gotten into a lot of trouble. Because that was not a happy time to be running trucks around that particular part of the world.
It was, stuff is on the move. In other words, the chow came from the locals, but all the repair parts and mechanics and all that kind of stuff,
That
we'd have to move it all around. And so it was a very decentralized operation in order to get the business done.
Understand.
And the best way to do that was to reinforce the battery commanders, who were all very able guys, and then get out and try to help them every way we could. So that's what. It's not as if the reinforcing guys didn't help them out. The
Right.
reinforced guys didn't help them out. And they certainly did on food, but all the parts, I mean, we were normally with light units,
Right.
and they didn't have our kind of parts and tracks and all that kind of stuff, so you couldn't depend upon them for maintenance support. We had to do our own.
Probably weren't more than 3 or 4 M109 battalions in Vietnam.
There was one in the, there's The howitzer batteries were located in the 11th ACR, and there was a 155 outfit in the 27th group and one in ours, and that's it.
Yeah, so,
155. Now, of course, all the 8-inch 175s were SP.
but I mean, there are a lot of parts that are specific to the 109.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I guess probably you flew those around sometimes if they were small enough to carry in your helicopter.
Well, we made it. I mean, my helicopter, I didn't carry any parts for it, but it carried me around in a Sergeant Major. That's about it. That's all you could handle. But if we had something, we'd order up a Huey and move it around, or a Chinook if we had to move it around with a Chinook. And if we didn't, we moved around by truck.
Did you have any problems with that? Did you get trucks mined or ambushed?
No, don't recall. I recall losing, I believe, only 2 guys to hostile action. That's what I recall. Let me call my kill. That's
Yeah.
one of the kill, 2.
Was that attacks on the fire bases?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to begin to ask questions of the kinds of decisions you had to make. Okay, well, let's start with, you worked for Colonel Norris, whom you knew.
And he left you alone, as long as you're doing. He didn't interfere with running a battalion. And again, I mean, looking at it was quite autonomous, which suited my style nicely.
Suits you down to the ground, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't a question of Colonel Norris checking with me 4 times a day or telling me what to do. He didn't do that. I mean, his 3 might call up and ask me some questions or whatever, but I mean, essentially, I was out doing what I was supposed to be doing to support the people I was told to support. Now, he would tell me who to support, like we're going to move from supporting the 9th Division or supporting the 101st to go to the 193rd or whatever it was, but in the main, those were the kind of mission type orders.
Right.
And over to you, Charlie. And
Yeah, right, you go
it's fine.
check with the
Go-
supporting
You go
unit.
figure it out and tell them where you're going to move and report back. So it was a very autonomous operation. And so it fitted me well.
Was there much point in having group headquarters under those circumstances, other than give people jobs?
Groups were, you're looking back on it, groups were there because groups had come with, you get 3 or 4 battalions, you get a group.
Okay,
Ruled support structure.
right.
But because of the decentralized nature of artillery support, like from a group, and because it was farmed out, a group didn't function like a group would in Germany, where a group actually is in the business of controlling fires on a day-to-day basis, and or acting as an alternative headquarters for a Divardia, which is supporting it. None of that happened in my jurisdiction.
The crash program to bring the guns up when you were group exec was a useful kind of support for the groups, because apparently you made extraordinary efforts to get the parts that they
It means battalion commanders didn't do their duty.
they could have done it.
You bet. I mean, get done the same did, which is go to heroic means to get it done, because the guy wanted to get it done. The other thing I did when I was a group executive officer, I hired a bright young lieutenant who came from the gunnery department in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And he was my gunnery insurance guy for the assurance guy for the group. He went out and made sure that all the groups knew what they were doing. All the battalions and batteries knew what they were doing about fire direction. His name is Bortman, and he's now a brigadier general.
Workman?
Brickman.
Brickman.
Brickman, and Jim Brickman is now a brigadier general. He was a lieutenant then. He's doing quite well. He's the 18th Airborne Corps Artillery commander. But when he came through the pool, because he had come straight from Fort Sill as a guy who had been out in the gunnery game, running it on a day-to-day basis, teaching it on a day-to-day basis, I jerked him out of the system and said, once you get my gunnery assurance program going right, then I will send you down, you can be a battery exec, which he did. But got him started on it. That's the kind of thing you could do at the group level that would aid and abet the guys at the bottom of the pile. But in the main, it was a decentralized operation. The other thing I did, and I mentioned this before to you, that we got a 4th Battalion in there.
Right.
155.
Were you in the group then?
Yeah, I was a group exec. I was the guy who issued the order to cross-level it, which was probably the worst thing I've ever done under orders in my life, but I didn't understand it then. To break up a perfectly good outfit that had come, trained together, worked together, fired together, shot together, bade goodbye to their families together for the purpose of us breaking it up when he got to Europe. And I've been meaning to go research that. That's worthy of writing an article.
That is, yes.
And so that's one of my projects, to go check the archives and have somebody show me why Westmoreland directed that to be done, if he did.
Yeah, where did the order come from?
Or whether that was a USARB, United States Army Vietnam order, who did that, because that was really stupid.
Yeah, well, it screwed up the other 3 battalions.
Screwed up the other 3 battalions and screwed up that battalion, and it made it easy on personnel managers back in the States.
Never can learn that their job is to serve.
Well, they never learned that cohesion is important. I mean, they talk about it, but they won't make it happen. A bureaucracy the size of the Army has an ongoing institutionalization process that the longer it is entrenched, the more it got handed down by Elihu Root. Therefore, it's immutable. And you got to root out stuff like that. And that came down to whether Milperson did that and ordered that done to some personnel toad in Saigon who knuckled onto it, or whether the Chief of Staff of the Army made that decision, Harold K. Johnson, or somebody else made that decision, and then we all went out and did that. I don't know how in the hell that got done, but it's one of those things I have to research, otherwise it's going to stick in my craw.
Well, if I can help, I'd be glad to.
I need to go to Hal Nelson and get a little research done about him. Punch files and see how you can get into their documentaries over there in the historical branch.
That's certainly the place to get it done. Doesn't work, bother me, no. I feel like I'd like to ask some more questions about Vietnam, but I don't have them. I think they'll probably come up later.
Well, a couple of observations about it. One is, except for an occasional guy like a sergeant major who went off and got shacked up in them, and he didn't calculate that as part of being, he didn't do that willfully on the night they were going to attack, I don't think. But nonetheless, with exception of something like that, that was the exception. I didn't have any of this fragging stuff. To my knowledge, I don't remember a single guy getting hauled up on dope pushing or smoking pot or whatever. Now this is the year 67, 68. November 67, November 60, I don't remember, I don't know any of that stuff. I mean, it's beyond my pale. And so my experience in Vietnam was a sheltered experience. That is to say, I wasn't with an infantry unit. And so guys who were doing search and destroy operations and that kind of stuff, I wasn't directly associated with that. So now, I was supporting units who were out doing that. So, let's see if I can put this in the right context. If you go down and look at a delta, where I'd go down and check my battery down there, they might be out doing an operation like that. But because I didn't live it on a day-to-day basis with that organization, I didn't get this morose feeling that the strategy was all bad. Because I wasn't intimately connected with the strategy in that region long enough to get a sense of its futility. I mean, I would go in and do business with the party commander in the 9th ID or whoever we were doing business with, and so I guess I really didn't get the sense of futility that many of my colleagues might have gotten at the same time. So on balance, I came back from that as a guy that felt like he'd gone and done his business and done reasonably well about that. So I know there's a lot of frustration from a lot of people and in my age group. I'm not sure either they had it at the time.
Yeah.
It may be upon reflection that they thought that they had more problems with the strategy, et cetera, or the non-strategy, as opposed to what they were doing at that particular moment. But then again, I'm just saying to you, although my guys were firing a tremendous number of rounds, I didn't suffer the casualties that they suffered, and I wasn't in a division on a day-to-day basis to hear the daily orders and go through the daily travail that a direct support artillery guy might have gone through had he been assigned to a division. So I got a little bit different view about war. In other words, I wasn't a disgruntled guy coming back. I thought I'd done what I was supposed to do and what I'd set out to do. I'd set out to command troops, and I had. And so I felt good about that.
How about, did you talk to soldiers in the batteries?
Oh, yeah.
And what kind of sense did you get?
I got the sense that they were dynamite kids doing what they were asked to do, and were perfectly good people. I mean, it wasn't a discipline problem. I would say I don't recall court-martialing anybody for that purpose. I mean, for being disgruntled or whatever. It was very high-quality young people that were working for us. They may not have all been highly educated or anything like that, but their quality of service was outstanding. In other words, I never got this malaise
Right.
or downtrodden or downbeat or whatever it may be that other people might have gotten. But again, I say I'm sort of in a unique kind of unit.
I never got it either. I thought, oh my God, I must have been unbelievably naive. I wouldn't know what a guy who was stoned looked like, because I'd never seen one. And I was in an infantry division and then in the 24th Corps Artillery up near Fubai. But I don't know whether there was much of that going on in 67, 68. May have
I didn't see it.
Did you do civic action out of your headquarters by any chance in the local area?
Did some med caps and that kind of stuff. But I lived in the provincial capital, so I mean, my civic action. I didn't, it's just not like having a big unit to go do that. I had some medical stuff I did, but that was about it.
Yeah, you were in a big population area with a very small unit.
Relatively big. I mean, it wasn't like being in a little village. It's a pretty good sized town.
Did you court-martial some people?
I recall I don't recall court-martialing him.
How about the sergeant major, first sergeant
I
major?
fired him and issued him a Zippo on his efficiency.
Did you have pretty much 90% or 80% personnel strength most of the time?
As far as I can recall, I was at 100% strength all the time. Good strength. Never had a problem with people.
How about spare parts?
I never had a problem with that.
Was that because you got on people or because the system was working?
The system worked. I mean, I was reasonably close to Long Bend. That's where all the parts came in. So if I had a problem, I'd send somebody to Long Bend, get the part. So it was a pull function on my part from Long Bend. It was easy to get to. That's where the center parts were. If I had a howitzer and needed fixing, I towed it in there. If I couldn't fix it myself or my people couldn't fix it, but I don't recall ever being severely constrained by parts or mechanics or by general numbers of people.
And ammunition, did you have enough when you needed it?
Always had enough.
Okay, well,
It was not the unit was never deprived of the resources that it needed to construct either people or capital goods or repair parts.
fortification materials too, I guess, were.
Had a rule, you couldn't sleep until you dug yourself in and covered it with a piece of corrugated the piping, the piping you used to culvert material, and covered the culvert material with 3 sandbags. Couldn't sleep till you did that. That's a house rule.
That's probably why.
Didn't lose anybody with mortars either. To incoming mortars.
While you were there, did you come out on the War College list? Is that?
No. In fact, I came back and I was posted to Desper in the ROTC game, and that was in like November of '68, and the War College list didn't come out until the following February or January or February. So no, I didn't have any idea whether it'd be on the war. I'd been very presumptuous because I just got out of Leavenworth.
Yeah, I know.
Got out of Leavenworth.
But you did have very close.
Yeah, I got out of Leavenworth in '67. Went to Vietnam at the end of '67, November, after my 6 weeks of language school, to be a rough puff. And went straight to Desper then in November of '68, and got selected and went to the War College in '69, 370, graduated in '70. So I had about 7 months duty on the Army staff as a Desper toad.
And that's where a lot of things got started, didn't
I was in ROTC. ROTC again was sort of back in the backwoods, it was a big problem. They were blowing up the campuses all over America.
they? Who was the general in charge of ROTC? Had the staff action? Brigadier General, wasn't there sort of in charge of the ROTC operation?
There was the guy that was in charge of Desper training was Willard Pearson, and he had ROTC under his cognizance. Later, Lieutenant General Pearson.
What were you doing in the ROTC cell?
Staff toad. There was a colonel named Cronin that ran it, and I was number 2 guy in the shop. And all we did was routine, not so routine in those days because they were busy blowing up the campus. People wanted to throw them off campus. We were trying to keep it together and run the advisory committee from the various presidents that were.
Organize that.
The guy from Ohio State was one on that committee at that time, President of Ohio State, President of Georgia. The college up there at Dahlonega, Georgia Military, what's that thing up there in Dahlonega where Grange and others went to school?
Is it military school?
Yeah. It's North Georgia State College, that's what it is. And, but it's a military, sort of heavily involved in military ROTC program. But then I reported to Westmoreland once a week on what was getting blown up on what campus. You know, Howard's getting blown up here, Ripon State is getting blown up here, the University of Wisconsin-Madison's getting blown up there, Harvard's getting blown up here, and the SDS is taking us apart. Something, you know, it's a big Donnybrook all the time in the ROTC game. Meanwhile, take care of ordinary routine staff actions associated with ROTC. So I was just an average staff officer. Got my first smell of how to run a paper in the Pentagon.
That's what I was thinking. That's where you learned to run papers.
Run papers.
And that's how you sold yourself to Dupuis crowd, right?
Later on, right. To Billy Rich. And off to the War College, and the War College was exciting. We had Bobby Schweitzer in there, and Glenn Otis, and a bunch of guys in my class. We had a very good War College. Everybody had been to Vietnam.